The Russia-Ukraine conflict has taken a dramatic and potentially explosive turn in the last 24 hours, with allegations, denials, and escalating tensions that threaten to completely derail the fragile peace process that appeared to be making genuine progress just days ago. On Monday, December 29th, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made an extraordinary and explosive claim that Ukraine launched a massive large-scale drone attack targeting one of President Vladimir Putin's personal residences, specifically alleging that 91 long-range drones were used in an attempted strike on Putin's residence located on Lake Valdai in the Novgorod region of northwestern Russia between Sunday night and Monday morning. According to Lavrov's account, Russian air defense systems successfully destroyed all 91 drones before they could reach their intended target, and he insisted there were no injuries and no damage to the property. But the very fact that such an attack was allegedly attempted represents what Russia is characterizing as a major escalation and a direct provocation designed to sabotage the ongoing peace negotiations. Ukraine's response to these Russian allegations was immediate, forceful, and unambiguous. President Volodymyr Zelensky categorically rejected the claimed drone attack as a complete fabrication from Russia, essentially accusing Moscow of manufacturing this entire incident for political purposes. Zelensky was particularly pointed in noting the suspicious timing of these allegations, emphasizing that the claim emerged exactly one day after he had spent almost 3 hours meeting with United States President Donald Trump at the Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, a meeting that by all accounts had been productive and moved the peace process forward significantly. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha strongly echoed Zelensky's flat denial and went even further by urging the international community to openly condemn what he characterized as provocative Russian statements that are specifically aimed at derailing the constructive peace process that has been painstakingly built over recent weeks. The Ukrainian government's position is crystal clear. They believe Russia has invented this alleged attack as a pretext to walk away from commitments made during negotiations or to justify future escalatory actions, while blaming Ukraine for the breakdown of diplomatic efforts. Russia's response to what it claims was this attempted attack on Putin's personal residence has been equally dramatic and carries potentially severe implications for the peace process. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated explicitly that, as a direct result of this alleged attack in the Novgorod region, Russia's negotiating position will be revised in the ongoing peace talks seeking to end Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, suggesting that Russia may now demand additional concessions or impose new conditions that could make reaching an agreement significantly more difficult or even impossible. Even more ominously, Lavrov revealed that despite claiming no damage or casualties resulted from the incident, the Russian military has already selected specific targets for what he termed retaliatory strikes, raising the terrifying prospect of a major escalation in military operations at precisely the moment when diplomatic channels seem to be opening up meaningful possibilities for de-escalation and eventual peace. The situation became even more complicated and politically charged when President Donald Trump entered the fray with comments that appeared to lend credence to Putin's version of events, at least initially. Trump revealed that Putin had personally informed him of the alleged attack during a phone call early Monday morning. Trump went further, stating that when Putin told him about the supposed attack, he was very angry about it. However, Trump's position became somewhat more ambiguous when a reporter specifically asked him about Ukraine's firm denial of launching any such attack. This episode highlights the extremely delicate and complicated position Trump finds himself in as he attempts to broker a peace deal between two sides with radically different accounts of events and fundamentally incompatible visions of what a settlement should look like. The alleged attack incident comes just one day after what had been described as a historic and potentially breakthrough meeting between Trump and Zelensky at Mar-a-Lago on December 28th, a meeting that by all accounts had produced significant progress on the most difficult issues separating the parties. The most concrete and important outcome of that Trump-Zelensky meeting was the announcement that the United States is now offering Ukraine security guarantees for a period of 15 years as part of the proposed peace plan, a commitment that represents a substantial American undertaking to help protect Ukraine against future Russian aggression even if Ukraine is not permitted to join NATO. However, Zelensky made clear that while he appreciates this 15-year commitment, he would strongly prefer an American security guarantee commitment of up to 50 years, arguing that a longer time frame would provide much more robust deterrence against Russia launching any further attempts to seize Ukrainian territory by force in the future, and would give Ukraine the confidence and stability it needs to rebuild and recover from the devastating impact of nearly 4 years of full-scale war. During the joint press conference that followed their talks at Mar-a-Lago, President Zelensky provided remarkably optimistic assessments of the progress that has been achieved in the peace negotiations, stating that the 20-point peace plan is now 90% agreed upon between the parties and that critically, United States and Ukraine's security guarantees are 100% agreed, suggesting that at least between Washington and Kyiv there is complete alignment on what security arrangements need to look like in any final settlement. Zelensky characterized the meeting as having produced great achievements and expressed confidence that the remaining 10% of unresolved issues could be worked through with continued good faith negotiations. The specific details of these security guarantees have not been made fully public, but Zelensky indicated Monday that they include provisions for how any peace deal would be monitored and verified, as well as what he described as the presence of partners, though he did not elaborate on exactly what that presence would entail or which countries would be involved. The reference to presence is particularly significant because Russia has consistently and emphatically stated that it will absolutely not accept the deployment in Ukraine of troops from NATO countries, viewing any such presence as an unacceptable security threat that would effectively defeat the entire purpose of negotiations from Moscow's perspective. One crucial aspect of these security guarantees that could prove to be a major political hurdle is Zelensky's revelation that the agreement would be put to a vote by the United States Congress, meaning that even if Trump and his administration negotiate and sign such an agreement, it would require approval from both the House of Representatives and the Senate to become binding American policy. This congressional requirement introduces significant uncertainty into the process because there is no guarantee that Congress will approve whatever deal Trump negotiates, particularly if there is opposition from either Democrats who might view the terms as too favorable to Russia or from Republicans who might be skeptical about making long-term security commitments to Ukraine. Zelensky also mentioned that during the meeting an economic package was discussed, suggesting that in addition to security guarantees there may be substantial American financial commitments to help Ukraine rebuild its shattered infrastructure and economy once fighting ends. Despite the progress on security guarantees and the overall framework of a peace agreement, there remain several absolutely critical sticking points that could still derail the entire process, and these territorial and political issues represent the hardest and most intractable problems that negotiators must somehow resolve. The Donbas region in eastern Ukraine continues to be one of the most contentious issues, with Ukraine still controlling a significant chunk of this industrialized area, and Zelensky vowing that his country will not simply give up that land without getting something meaningful in return. However, Russia wants the entire Donbas region, and this represents a major demand that Putin has shown absolutely no desire to compromise on whatsoever, viewing control of Donbas as a core war aim that justified the entire invasion in the first place. American negotiators have previously floated the concept of establishing what they call a free economic zone in Donbas as a potential compromise that might allow both sides to claim some degree of success. But Zelensky stated Monday that there is no detailed concept of how such a zone would actually work in practice, and he emphasized that Ukrainian society would need to be extensively consulted through democratic processes on any such agreement before his government could accept it. Another major point of contention involves the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, which is Europe's largest nuclear facility and has been occupied by Russian forces since the early stages of the invasion, creating ongoing international concerns about nuclear safety and the risk of a catastrophic accident or incident. Both Russia and Ukraine want control of this strategically and economically important facility in any final settlement, and finding a mutually acceptable arrangement for managing and securing this nuclear plant will require creative diplomacy and possibly international involvement to provide assurances to both sides. Zelensky has also stated that he believes the entire 20-point peace plan should be put to a referendum in Ukraine, allowing the Ukrainian people to directly vote on whether to accept whatever terms are ultimately negotiated. But he noted that organizing such a referendum would require a ceasefire of at least 60 days to allow for proper campaigning and voting procedures. This referendum requirement creates another complication because Moscow has categorically ruled out agreeing to any temporary ceasefires, with Putin insisting that Russia is only interested in negotiating a permanent peace agreement and not some temporary pause in fighting that would allow Ukraine to regroup and rearm. Trump indicated Sunday that he understood Russia's position on this issue, suggesting that the American president may be pressuring Ukraine to accept a permanent settlement rather than seeking an interim ceasefire arrangement. The diplomatic maneuvering has been intense over the past several days, with Trump engaging in multiple conversations with both Zelensky and Putin as he tries to navigate between these two leaders and find some common ground that could form the basis of a sustainable peace agreement. On Monday, Trump had what he characterized as a positive call with Russian President Vladimir Putin about the war, according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. And notably, this was the second conversation between Trump and Putin within just 24 hours, as the two leaders had also spoken shortly before Trump's talks with Zelensky on Sunday. Trump later told reporters that he had a very good talk with Putin and acknowledged that we have a few very thorny issues, as you can imagine, in the negotiations to end the war. Putin's foreign affairs advisor, Yuri Ashakov, provided some insight into Russia's reading of Trump's approach, stating that Trump is pushing Ukraine to seek a comprehensive peace agreement and not demand a temporary respite for its military through a ceasefire, which aligns with Russia's stated preference for a full and final settlement before agreeing to any cessation of hostilities. While all of this diplomatic activity has been unfolding at the highest levels of government, the brutal reality on the ground is that fighting has continued unabated across multiple fronts throughout Ukraine, with both sides still actively engaged in combat operations and neither side showing any inclination to reduce military pressure while negotiations proceed. Russia's army announced Monday that its forces had captured the village of Dubrova in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region, adding to the steady if incremental territorial gains that Russian forces have been achieving. through grinding attritional warfare over recent months. In the southeastern Zaporizhzhia region, at least one civilian was killed and another injured in a Russian attack on the city of Kyiv, according to regional governor Ivan Fedorov, who reported that Russian-guided aerial bombs struck this frontline city, killing a 46-year-old man and injuring a 49-year-old woman. Yet another reminder that civilians continue to bear an enormous burden from this conflict. In northeastern Ukraine's Kharkov region, Governor Alled Sinyahubov reported that Russian shelling had injured 3 people over the past 24 hours, and Ukraine's general staff stated that 89 combat engagements had been recorded along the front lines since the start of the day, indicating that despite all the talk of peace, the war continues at high intensity. Looking ahead to the next steps in this peace process, Zelensky announced that the next meeting at the advisor level among the United States, Ukraine and European representatives will take place in the coming days, and he indicated that Kyiv has already contacted all the advisors involved in the process to begin coordinating schedules and agendas. Zelensky emphasized that we are all determined to ensure that these meetings, which I have told you about, take place in January, setting a clear timeline for continued diplomatic engagement in the new year. French President Emmanuel Macron has also stepped forward to play a coordinating role, announcing that Ukraine's allies will meet in Paris in early January to finalize each country's concrete contributions to the security guarantees that are being negotiated, ensuring that there is a clear understanding of what resources and commitments each partner country is prepared to provide. Zelensky explained that the 20-point peace plan must ultimately be signed by 4 parties, specifically Ukraine, Europe, America, and Russia, making clear that this is not just a bilateral agreement between Kyiv and Moscow, but rather a comprehensive multilateral settlement that requires buy-in and active participation from Ukraine's Western partners. However, any optimism about the direction of negotiations must be tempered by Russia's continued intransigence on its core demands, and Moscow's demonstrated willingness to shift its positions and create new obstacles whenever it serves Russian interests. Following the meeting between Zelensky and Trump, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stated on Monday morning that Moscow's demands have not changed whatsoever, and he specifically reiterated that Kyiv must completely withdraw its troops from the territories of Ukraine's eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, commonly known as the Donbas, before Russia will even consider a final peace agreement. This Russian demand for complete Ukrainian withdrawal from all of Donbas, regardless of current control lines, represents a maximalist position that Ukraine has consistently rejected as unacceptable capitulation, and the gap between Russia's stated demands and what Ukraine is willing to concede remains enormous despite months of negotiations. The current situation can only be described as extraordinarily precarious and volatile, with the peace process hanging by a thread after the allegations surrounding the supposed attack on Putin's residence. Whether this alleged incident is genuine or fabricated, whether it represents Ukrainian escalation or Russian provocation, the effect has been to inject enormous uncertainty and mistrust into negotiations at precisely the moment when both sides seem to be moving closer to a potential breakthrough. The coming days will be absolutely critical in determining whether cooler heads prevail and the diplomatic momentum can be restored, or whether this incident becomes the excuse that one side or both sides use to walk away from the table and return to pure military solutions. Trump finds himself in an incredibly difficult position, trying to maintain credibility in relationships with both Zelensky and Putin while pushing both leaders toward compromises that their domestic audiences may find difficult or impossible to accept. The international community watches anxiously, hoping that nearly 4 years of devastating warfare that has killed hundreds of thousands of people and displaced millions more might finally be coming to an end, while simultaneously fearing that one miscalculation or one deliberately provocative act could shatter the fragile possibility of peace and condemn Ukraine and Russia to many more years of bloodshed and destruction with no resolution in sight.